Hello again and welcome to another Mordian Glory Warhammer 40k video. In today's episode we are going to be talking about the hottest of topics, the latest Games Workshop Balance Dataslate and Munitorum Field Manual Points updates. Now, if you're new to 40k, some of these terms might be a bit confusing, but don't worry. Essentially, what has just happened is Games Workshop has come along and they've updated some of the rules and points values for the match play game of Warhammer 40k. This is done every few months, sometimes every 3 months, sometimes every 6 months, but this is done on a fairly regular basis to try and smooth things out, to bring balance to the force. Because Warhammer 40k has so many factions and a lot of moving parts, it can be difficult to have everything perfectly balanced as it should be. And so GW is constantly tweaking the game and making these little improvements to help try and sort the game out, make sure any of the oppressive factions are reined in and any of the struggling factions get a bit of a boost, but also it helps to keep things fresh, exciting and interesting. Now, of course, with this being an Imperial Guard channel, we shall be focusing on their changes for this video. But don't worry, I will be doing another video going through all the other factions and their points changes and giving my first impressions and hot takes. But with all of that said, now let's get into the nitty-gritty, the good stuff. Let's take a look at the points changes that the Guard received in the latest Munitorum Field Manual. Now, on the surface, this might not seem like the biggest of topics. After all, the Guard only had 1 points value change. Sadly, it was a points increase, which is wild when you consider that according to GW's own MetaWatch data, the Guard is actually one of the, I think, bottom 3 factions. It might be bottom 5 factions in the game. So not getting some pretty significant point changes certainly feels like a strange move by Games Workshop, and then actually giving us a points increase on a unit is frankly baffling. And this goes from baffling to, frankly, mind-boggling when you realize that the unit that changed was the Manticore. And the Manticore went from 150 points, which was already making it the most expensive Codex artillery piece, and even I think some of the most expensive Forge World artillery as well, excluding things like the wacky Praetor and stuff like that. It went from 150 points to an eye-watering 180 points. If you're a big fan of the Manticore, I'm sorry to say this, I don't mean to get you down, but frankly, this is the death of the Manticore. It is now completely and utterly unviable. It's the equivalent of GW taking the Manticore around the back of the chemical sheds and shooting it in the back of the head. By being 180 points, the Manticore is crippled for so many reasons. And firstly, and I think most importantly, it's now competing with the Leman Russ. Leman Russes, especially Exterminator variants, cost exactly the same as the new Manticore, and yet they're better in nearly every single way. They've got more wounds, more toughness, better armor save. They have significantly more reliable shots. If you look at the Exterminator, for example, that thing is putting out a consistent 4 to 8 shots every single time. Those shots are also more than likely going to be hitting better than the Manticore. The very least hitting as good as the Manticore. Manticore hits on 4s unless it's got an order, and that is the same for the Exterminator. You've also got the fact that the Exterminator will be wounding more reliably because it has twin linked built in. And then you've got the fact that the Exterminator is bringing a whole bunch of accoutrement to the table as well, in the form of the las cannon that you're going to put on the front of it and the multi-melter or plasma cannon sponsons that it's going to have as well. And I would also argue that the Exterminator has a far more valuable ability over the Manticore, with Withering Hail acting as a fantastic force multiplier. So you might think, well, I still want to take the Manticore because it has indirect fire, but then you start realizing that the Manticore is not only dealing with new competition, but it's now losing out to its old competition in the form of the other artillery you can take in your Guard army. For example, the Basilisk. Basilisk is 45 points cheaper. It has a far more reliable fire output with the D6 plus 3 shots. No rolling a 1 and this thing's useless for a turn. On top of this, the Basilisk, sure it has less strength, but with lethal hits for staying still, that's really not a big deal. And it's got the same AP. So the Basilisk only really loses out to the Manticore in one respect. That is flat damage 3. And frankly, Guard isn't struggling for flat damage 3. Pretty much all of our tanks have got it. We've got Rogel Dawns, Lehman Russes, got all sorts of things that are going to be pumping out. We've got autocounts on infantry squads. There's so much flat damage 3 in the Guard right now. Not having it on the not having it on your artillery is really not the end of the world. But then we get to what I think is kind of the ironic part of all this, which is the Manticore was kind of falling out of favor in a lot of Guard armies anyway. Sure, you had some players that had some recent success with them, and I think that this is frankly a knee-jerk reaction because in the last couple of weeks there have been some Guard players who have placed very well with 2 or 3 Manticores in the list. And so it feels like GW has basically gone, oh, crap, we need to do something about the Guard. What's the most common tournament list featuring? What units have they all got? Okay, yeah, Manticore, yeah, put it up by 30 points. That's what it feels like. They had 5 minutes to reach the deadline before they all had to leave early on a Friday in the balance team, and they hadn't got to the Guard yet, so they just literally went on the last Meta Monday day to saw the list and were like, yeah, that'll do 30 points to the Manticore. Like I said, it's kind of ironic because for a lot of Guard players, they'd moved away from the Manticore already. With it being so swingy, flat damage 3 is great, but Guard players were kind of cottoning on to the fact that you have flat damage 3 in spades. You've got Exterminators, Battle Cannons, Rogel Dawns, Autocannons. There's flat damage 3 coming out of the wazoo in the Guard army. And so myself, and I know many others, had gone over to the Basilisk anyway. The last few tournaments I've been to, I've been putting Basilisks in my lists, not really Manticores, unless I was going for like pure artillery spam. And then it was like, I still preferred the Basilisk every time anyway. I was only taking the Manticore to fill out the artillery ranks, as it were. And that is because the Basilisk has a game-winning ability, and that is Earthshaker Shells. Earthshaker Shells, if you hit an infantry unit, it reduces their movement by 2, and their advance and charge rolls are reduced by 2 as well. Against some armies, this is crippling. I was at a tournament yesterday, as the time of recording this video, and I won a game before a shot had even been fired, because playing against an army that had a lot of Terminators in it, they deployed some of those Terminators on the board, and I got turn 1. And so basically it was just Basilisk, Basilisk, Basilisk. Slow all your units down, and then the rest of my army just gets to shoot to you at its leisure. So yeah, it's funny how they have nerfed the Manticore when I kind of think the sun was setting on it anyway, and we were seeing the dawn of the Basilisk. So in a funny sort of way, the changes to the Manticore aren't going to have a huge impact on the direction that a lot of Guard players were going in anyway. If anything, it just confirms that you want to get on that Basilisk hype train. But what's even funnier about this is it actually doesn't change anything at all. Because if you want to take flat damage 3 artillery in your Guard, you still can. And now you can do it for even cheaper than you were doing it before. Because say goodbye to the Manticore and say hello to the Medusa. This Forge World artillery piece has 36-inch range, blast, indirect fire, strength 10, d6 shots, AP -3, flat damage 3. It also causes battle shock tests when you get hit by it as well. This, of course, has got the same strength and damage value of the Manticore. The key differences being that it's a little bit more swingy with the d6 shots rather than d6 plus 1. Hopefully Blast will make up for it, and I'm going to be honest with you, whenever I rolled a 1 on the Manticore, it still felt like it was doing nothing anyway. So I'm not sure that d6 plus 1 is a big deal versus d6. I think the big difference is really, are you d6 plus 1, d6, or d6 plus 3? I think that's what makes the real big difference. So it's a little bit more swingy, but I don't think massively so. And of course, the shorter range could be a bit of an issue. Although 36 inch range will be more than enough to cover all the middle objectives, which is where most of the fighting is going to be taking place. But on the plus side, it's AP minus 3 off the bat. So even if you're firing it indirect and someone's getting the benefit of cover, you're still AP minus 2. Even if someone has Armor of Contempt, you're still AP minus 1. And the brilliant news is that the Medusa is so much cheaper than the Manticore now. 2 Manticores is going to cost you 360 points. 3 Medusas is only going to cost you 330. In fact, you probably wouldn't even take 3 Medusas. Let's say you had a pair of Manticores on your list. You swap those out for a pair of Medusas. That's 220 points. That's enough points to get yourself some kind of officer like Creed to just sit there and babysit them and be like, order for you, order for you. Because obviously the Manticore hits on 4s and then it benefits from heavy. So even when it's firing indirect, it still hits on 4. The Medusa, by contrast, does have a ballistic skill of 5+, but now that you could just easily save points on taking the Manticores out of your list and just put the Medusas in anyway, you can afford to put a Castellan with 2 orders there, or Creed, or Strachan, anyone who can really just sit there and babysit them and do 2 orders. You can just do that, and it's only going to cost you 55 points. You can give them take aim, and suddenly your Medusas are hitting at the same that your Manticores were. In fact, I think the Medusa is going to be coming back in favor just because it's being highlighted now. Even at the old points value, if you were taking 2 Manticores, that would have been 300 points, and you could have taken your 2 Medusas with your officer for 275. So it was like, oh, well, maybe it's a bit swingy. I'm not sure. I'd rather pay the extra 25 points for not needing the officer, and I'd rather pay the extra 25 points for having him built, hitting on 4s and all this kind of stuff, and the defense one. Now it's not even a thing. Now it's like, you know what? I'm not going to spend an extra God knows how many points, almost 100 points more on 2 Manticores. I'm going to save points over what I was taking before the points of date and stick the Medusa in the list. So, in summary, regarding the Manticore, yes, it is a big disappointment. Yes, it is a head scratcher. Yes, it seems like it is the wrong move by Games Workshop. But on the plus side, I don't think it's going to massively impact the Guard competitive meta. I think some people who were already taking Manticores will pivot into other artillery pieces like Basilisks and Medusas. And I think a lot of people were already favouring the Basilisk over the Manticore anyway. But moving on from the Manticore, let's take a look at the wider Guard points. And I think the big disappointment here is not what changed, but what didn't change. There were a lot of players who were hoping, especially that the Forge World points were going to go down. Forge World tanks that missed out on the last points cut and were left behind with early edition points costs, which truly did not reflect their capabilities. I mean, the fact that we're still looking at 310 points at things like the Malcador Defender, which has a truly terrible ability and in almost no way, shape or form would cost 50 points more than a Rogal Dawn. The fact that you're looking at this almost same points cost for a regular Malcador as you are a Rogal Dawn, again, that just doesn't make sense. The fact that you've got super heavies like the Macarius Vanquisher, which just is phenomenally terrible and probably needs a rules rewrite to make it worth taking. And again, I've used a regular Macarius in battle, and there's no way that this thing should be on the same level as a Rogal Dawn. Like, the Rogal Dawn is just much better. So not only is it a case of that one of our units went up in points, but so many of our units didn't get the changes that really they needed. And I'm not necessarily advocating that they need a huge amount of points decreases. I think that's one lever GW can pull. I think it's probably the simplest lever that they can pull. But I think that, you know, a lot of them would have done with a benefit from a bit of an update to their data sheets. And especially considering that the Forge World ones, their data sheets are just free online things anyway. You don't buy them. But like GW, you can go, oh, well, we wouldn't want everyone's data cards to be, that they bought to be out of date, to be nonsensical, to not make sense. Like, well, no, GW, these are just online. People are just using the app for them anyway. So you could very easily update them and have zero impact, negative impact on your community and only a positive one. But no points changes, no ability updates. A lot of stuff just left feeling meh. And a lot of the guard data sheets are fine. Like, you know, Cadians, they're fine. Catachans, they're fine. Infantry squads, they're fine. But what I find when you go through the guard units and points is that there are just some which are just better. And there are some units which are still okay in their own right, but in comparison to their competition, they just get left behind. For example, most people are going to take Death Corps of Krieg if they're looking at a competitive infantry choice, I mean, because they're just better. 10 points more, you get a better ability, you get more special weapons, you can have a fantastic Feel No Pain. Death Corps of Krieg are just the superior infantry choice. And I've been trying out lots of the infantry with Cadians and Catachans. You know, I've been giving this a good old test, and I keep coming back to the Kriegers. And sometimes I even fool myself, and I'll play like 2 or 3 games without the Kriegers and be like, oh yeah, like these Cadians, they can get the job done, they're just as good. And then I go to a tournament where I run Kriegers again, and I realized that actually before I had one hand tied behind my back, and that whilst I had infantry, I was just taking the not as good infantry. And so it would have been great to see Cadians maybe go down, same points as Catachans, really make that gap between a Cadian squad and a Krieg squad significant. Or maybe even Cadians a new ability, something like they get born soldiers all the time. That suddenly makes them really, really powerful, really valuable. That puts them in some serious competition with the Krieg. You'd have people arguing both ways which ones they should take. But no, points didn't change. And so the obvious good units remained the obvious good units. And, you know, a good example of this is, when was the last time you saw Rattlings on the battlefield? You didn't. That unit needs changing. And the last time you saw a Death Strike on the battlefield? What, like 9th edition? Yeah, they were cool in 9th edition. They actually worked. Were they powerful? No. But were they fun and interesting enough to work? Yeah. Not seen one in 10th edition. When was the last time you saw things like Ogre bodyguards, creatures, commissars? You just don't see them. When was the last time you saw, like, this might be a bit of a controversial one, but I'm going to throw it out there. When was the last time you saw armor sentinels? You don't. They're too expensive. Why would you take 3 armor sentinels? It's going to cost you more than Lehman Russ and have less, but at best, equal durability. If you take into account the sentinels got more wounds but got less toughness. At best, equal durability, and at worst, significantly less firepower. You wouldn't do that. No, there's a lot of reasons you would. There's a lot of good points about the armor sentinel that can be made, but you're still not seeing people taking them. You're seeing people take scout sentinels, or you're seeing people take tanks, but you're not seeing people take armor sentinels because they compete with units that do their job better. And so I think the internal balance of the guide right now is there's lots of fairly viable choices, but there's just some that are just obviously better. And what would have been nice is for Games Workshop to make things interesting. I think for me, this is the biggest disappointment with the guard point subject updates, is by not updating anything, we're just sat here again, just looking at our points like, oh, this is fun. What was good in my list before? Oh yeah, same stuff's good again now. I would have quite liked an update, keep things fresh and exciting. I was looking forward to the balance patch. And then it came out and all I saw was a Manticore change. I was like, meh, whatever. Literally don't need to change any of my pre-existing lists. I mean, that's a good thing in some ways. Obviously, people are like building their army up and they want to make sure that they're building, the goal they're building towards doesn't change. I get that 100%. It's also nice to have things that are fresh and interesting. You see it from both perspectives, for sure, for sure. But yeah, overall, I think looking at the points updates from every angle, what went up, what didn't go down, what didn't change, the just lack of real sort of attention. I think the main takeaway from the guard points updates is it's not a positive and it's a little bit of a disappointing negative. But don't worry, for it is not all doom and gloom. And where one hand, well, I would say taketh, but one hand simply doesn't giveth, the other hand does giveth. Because whereas the Munitor and Field Manual was a bit anticlimactic, The balanced Dataslate, whoo baby. Guard received one hell of a fix and one hell of a buff. You see, GW updated the voice of command army rule. It now states if your army factors Ashram at a time, officer models with this ability can issue orders. Each officer's datasheet will specify how many orders it can issue and which units are eligible to receive those orders. Each time an officer model issues an order, select one of the orders below, then select one eligible friendly unit within 6 inches of the officer model to issue it to. Now, so far, that is the same as normal. But then they added on this extra paragraph. And this is what is giving me an incredibly uncomfortable feeling in my trousers. Is that a bayonet in your pocket, or you're pleased to see me? Officer models can issue orders in your command phase and at the end of a phase in which they disembarked from a transport or were set up on the battlefield. Finally, the guard orders have been fixed, and this just feels right. Before, guard orders felt really awkward and really janky, and you could only do them in a very specific way, and then they were susceptible to being battle shocked, and no one else's army rules were susceptible to battle shock, and it just felt off, you know, and it just felt very immersion breaking. Oh, well, I've got out the transport, there was an officer in there. Well, can that unit have an order? No, because for some reason when you're in a transport, you're in the void, you're in the nether zone, you don't exist. Time is not linear in the transport void, and so it just felt wrong. And now there's a reason to put officers in transports, because you can get the guys out and they can actually receive an order. And I just like the idea of your officer and his squad piling out of the back of their Chimera, looking around, seeing the threat, and the officer's training kicks in, and he can be like, "Men, take aim, bring that beast down." It just works. And so not only does this feel like it's going to improve the order system, not only does it feel like it has made our army rule much more resilient, but also feels like the system is working as intended now. It feels less janky, less immersion breaking, and overall it's going to be a much more positive experience using your orders. But it's not just the soft factors, how it feels, that have been improved. There's also some serious buffs, both strategically and tactically, for the guard on the tabletop. Firstly, I think this makes Mech Guard, which was already a very tasty way of running your army, even more powerful. In the past, Mechanized Guard has suffered with orders because your most common vehicle tends to be Chimeras, and you have infantry that are inside of them that are trying to shoot out with their melter gun, plasmas using firing deck, but they're hitting on 4s or 5s if they use a weapon, and so rarely do those 2 guns poking out of that top hatch do much. But now you can drive forward and you can jump out and you can order the unit, and that unit can actually hit properly with the big guns. Now, yes, you could argue that you could have just ordered the Chimera and that would affect the things on the firing deck too, but guard vehicle orders are at a premium, so you weren't really likely to spend them on a Chimera when you could be putting it on a Lehman Russ or a Rogel Dawn. Another big boost to Met Guard is how their orders are now essentially insulated against battle shock. One of the big problems with the orders is that if you fail your battle shock test at the beginning of the turn, you can't have an order. And if you had an order on you, that order then goes away and affects the unit. But if you start inside the transport, even if someone hits you with something like Shadow in the Warp, because you're in the transport, you're in the void, you're in the nether zone, you don't have to take a battle shock test. So your orders and officers, whilst they're inside the transports, are protected from battle shock, and then you get to get out and use them, and there's no risk of them being taken away from you or the unit not being able to operate at peak efficiency with orders like take aim and first rank fire, second rank fire. But the really big question is, and what is a very hot topic of discussion right now, is do Chimeras allow you to get double orders? You see, the Chimera has an ability called Mobile Command Vehicle. This allows your officer, or an officer that is embarked inside the Chimera, do orders in the command phase, even though they couldn't normally do so. That's how it basically reads on the datasheet. And so the argument goes, well, if I use the Chimera's ability to do orders in my command phase, can I then disembark from the Chimera and do orders now that I've disembarked? And the answer is, my opinion, and I went through this extensively with chat in a live stream, yes, you can use the Chimera to double order. The simple fact of the matter is that rules as written, the new voice of command ability says, officer models can issue orders in your command phase and at the end of a phase in which they disembarked from a transport. Not or. It doesn't say one or the other. It says and. And so your officer model can issue orders in your command phase and then it can do it at the end of a phase in which it disembarked. Now, you might try and counter-argument this and say, but the datasheet says how many times the officer can do the orders. For example, if I have Creed, it says Creed can issue 2 orders to regiment units. This is true, but it doesn't say per phase. It doesn't say per turn. It just says that Creed can issue 2 orders. So how it works, and this is my interpretation of the rules, but I've had a lot of, like I said, we discussed this at length, pretty convinced that rules written is how it works, is how the step works is something triggers for the officer to do the order. So it's the command phase. If you have an officer, it may issue orders. How many orders may that officer issue when it has the opportunity to do so? Oh, the datasheet says it can do 2. And then when another point comes along later in the same turn, which again triggers the ability for the officer to issue an order, it's like, okay, well, another trigger has gone off. How many orders can you do according to your data sheet? So how I see it is each time an officer is given the opportunity to issue orders, it may take the opportunity and it may do as many as it can according to its data sheet. I've actually, in many ways, over-explained it and over-worded it there. And I know some people are going to be like, oh, Morton, you're adding steps in. And no. If you just look at this in the most simple possible way, it simply says and. It doesn't say or. And there's no reference to a limit or cap to how many orders you may issue when the officer can issue orders. So the fact that it says and is the key. And so it's clear to me, clear as day, that officer model can issue orders in your command phase, as many as it says in its data sheet, and then when it disembarks from transport, it can issue orders again, as many as it says in its data sheet. However, I fully respect that this is my interpretation, my reading of the rules, and you may strongly disagree with that. So please let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. But before anyone starts saying this isn't rules as intended and they're going to fix this and this is broken and overpowered, it's actually not. Even if GW doesn't change this, and even if it is kind of feel it's a bit janky, that in most cases, getting double orders from a Chimera is going to be no better than if you just took a command blob. For example, let's say you take Creed in a Chimera, and you have an infantry squad with Creed as well. You want to have something else in that Chimera. It's not just going to take Creed around, right? And you might want some extra Creed so it doesn't get sniped out. That's going to cost you 55 points for Creed, 60 points for the unit of Cadians, let's say, and then it's going to cost you 70 points for the Chimera. Now, this will allow you to do 2 orders from 6 inches from the Chimera, and then move 10 inches forward, disembark Creed 3 inches, and then do another 2 orders 6 inches from where Creed is. So in total, really even taking into account the size of the Chimera, really your order range for these 4 orders is going to be 10 inches plus 6 plus the disembark. Maybe add a couple of inches on for the Chimera. It's going to be about 20, 21 inches. And that's also not taking into account the fact that the Chimera will have to move around a lot of the ruins and L-shaped buildings and stuff that you find. So you probably won't even get the full 20 inches. If you go in a straight line, you would do. But there's probably going to be a lot of factors that mean that you'll be able to do a couple of orders from where you start, move forward a few inches, a couple of orders from where you finish, right? Or Very simply, you could take Creed in a platoon command squad, with an infantry squad attached, with Grand Strategist. And for almost exactly the same amount of points, it might be 5 points more, but it's basically the same level. You get Creed, who can sit behind an L-shaped ruin and do orders 24 inches away because of the Master Vox in the command squad. When you actually put it that way, it's not really broken at all. You might as well just take the command blob. So can you get double orders from a Chimera? Yes. Are you going to be able to utilize that in some fun battlefield ways? Yes. Is it going to be any more efficient than you taking a command blob? Probably not. Probably going to be less flexible. And if anything, it's going to be less powerful. But hey, it's cool. And it's certainly something that you can use. And I'm sure that there will be several ways you can take advantage of it, considering maybe you move 2 other units forward in Chimeras and then they disembark and Krieg gets out. I'm sure there are ways that you can take advantage of it. But purely looking at this from you can use it to extend the range and you can get bonus orders. No. It has some use in being able to combine well with units that start outside of transports and then units that get out of transports later. But overall, I don't think it's a super powerful mechanic. I think it's got some use, but for the majority of players, taking a command blob is still going to be their go-to efficient way of getting lots of orders at a good distance. With all of that said, now let's move on to the other part of this, because it's not just mechanized guard and transports that are loving it. It's units that get set up on the battlefield, and that does include from reserve. I bet every guard player with some Tempestus Scions, whether they're a pure Scions player or they've just got some supporting their guard forces, is rubbing their hands together with glee right now. Because you can take a big 10-man unit of Scions, you can attach a Scion command squad, making a 15-man Scion unit. And there can be 2 plasma pistols in there and 8 special weapons. Nice. And you can now give all of that, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s with sustained hits. Because Scions have rerolling 1s as their ability anyway. They get full rerolls if they're shooting something that's on an objective, reroll 1s just all the time. And then they can have take aim, and they drop in from reserve now. And then the officer gives sustained hits. That's a real punchy piece of power. Just coming in, smashing the entire area. We are going in with the first wave. Means more bugs for us to kill. You smashed the entire area. You got any more than 2 legs. You get me. Oh, we get you, sir. We get you. We are remembering our training, and we're going to come back alive. I really like what this can do with Scions. I think it's going to be a big boost for pure Scion armies, but I think also it really opens up the potential for Grenadier style armies, where you take lots of Scion infantry, support it with officers, have Scions in like transports, have Kazakin thrown in there as well, and then just back that up with loads of normal guard units like tanks and artillery. I wouldn't be surprised if Grenadier Guard becomes a damn viable playstyle. It's not just the Scholar Progenium that is loving the new order system. Kazakin are going to get a kick out of it as well. Kazakin were already quite tasty because they could use their warrior elite ability in reserve. But now you can take your Kazakin, add on a cheap character like a Castellan, and bring them in. Because Kazakin can benefit from 2 orders at the same time, thanks to, again, their warrior elite ability. So you could tell them to take aim using their own ability, and then when they come in from reserve, Stellan goes, would you also like the first rank fire, second rank fire? This is going to trigger and pair really nicely with the fact that the Castellan also gives you sustained hits 1 as well. So Kazakin are going to be able to come in from reserve, double order it, and lay down a very respectable amount of firepower. But you can get things really crazy if you add Creed in to a unit of Kazakin and put her in reserve. Because again, Creed's ability works with the warrior elite ability, and so you can have a unit of Kazakin that comes in from reserve and then proceeds to receive 2 additional orders, and so you could have First rank fire, second rank fire, take aim, and then maybe take cover, so you can do a lot of damage but also receive a bit in return. Or you could go for fixed bayonets and try and go for like a long bomb charge. There's all sorts of stuff you can do, and all of it is very nice, very tasty, and leads to making your Kazakin even deadlier. When I first saw Kazakin at the beginning of 10th, I wasn't that impressed by them, considering what they had been able to do in 9th. But as time has gone on, I've become more and more interested in the unit, and I have found them to be a very potent one. Are they going to come in and smash everything? No. Are they going to be very reliable and very flexible on the battlefield? Yes, and the new orders just make that even more so. Another unit which has been significantly buffed by this is Gaunt's Ghosts. Now, Gaunt's Ghosts were already really good, the mainstay in a lot of competitive lists. The fact they can go up in the sky, come back down, a bit like how a Kaz Assassin works, makes them fantastic for secondary objectives, that the lone operative makes them tough for your opponent to deal with at range, and they also can infiltrate, and they've got stealth and fight space. There's loads of stuff going on for them that makes them a really, really powerful unit. But the fact that now, when they use covert stealth team, where they go back into reserve at the end of your opponent's turn, when they come back in your reinforced step, they can do orders. And what a lot of people don't realize is Gaunt's Ghost doesn't do one order, he can do 2 orders. So that means you can drop in back with some reserves. Maybe you've had some Scions. That you've only got 3 Scion command squads. If you're a pure Scion player and you have 6 squads of Scions that might be teleporting in, well, 3 of them come in with Scion command squads. One of the Scion command squads, let's say, has got Grand Strategist. That's 4 of your Scion units covered, I guess. There's still 2 that won't have any orders. Well, don't worry about it. Gaunt's Ghost can drop down with them, and that is awesome. Now you've got all of your units well ordered. On top of that, Gaunt's Ghost can issue orders not just to regiment units, but also to Gaunt's Ghosts. So you can drop down and order yourself. Now, what order you go for is going to be, well, it kind of depends on what you're looking at. If you're looking to try and hold an objective, you might go for Duty and Honor, get yourself up to OC2 per model. If you want to do a bit more damage, you might do a bit of the old Take Aim. There's not much point in doing first rank fire, second rank fire, as there's no rapid fire weapons in this unit. But Take Aim would mean that everyone's going to be hitting on 2s, and Bragg would actually be hitting on 4s, which is good, because otherwise he's not having a great time. And then you've also got Take Cover, because Take Cover not only improves your save from shooting, but also it improves your save in combat. It generally gives you +1 to your armor save value. So that puts Gaunt up to a 3+ save out in the open, and it puts all of the ghosts up to a 4+ save as well. Now, I suspect that most people are just going to use Gaunt's Ghosts orders to buff themselves, and that does give you a nice little boost, but I think there is a lot of potential here with leveraging those 2 orders for stuff that's coming in from reserve, whether that is Kazakin units, whether that is Scion units, or simply whether that's something coming in from normal strategic reserve or even reinforcements. Because this is where I think the new guard orders, the new voice of command, really comes into its own, is the ability to finally get orders on those units that you are bringing back from reinforcements. I've said this a lot in my videos and in my battle reports, that a unit without orders is basically just a meat wave. It's just bodies on the table, just boots on the ground. It's a bunch of wounds that your opponent's going to have to carve through, but that's all you can really expect from it. It's a bunch of OC on an objective, which is nice, but it's not going to do anything in the way of damage. I have had units come in from reserve with no take aim, just hitting on 4s. I've had a full blob of 20 guardsmen with heavy weapons and special weapons, kill like 3 or 4 termagants, because hitting on 4s is just rubbish. But now you can put units in reserve. Now you can have reinforcements that come back. When they do come back, you can have a unit like Gaunt's Ghosts. You can have a unit like Creed that can also come onto the board. And they've got multiple orders knocking about the place. And suddenly your reinforcements are going to not just be coming back and adding their weight of numbers to your army, but also coming back and being effective. Reinforcements was already one of, if not the most powerful guard stratagem. And indirectly, it just got a very significant buff. But the last thing I want to say on this topic is it's not just about deep striking. It's not just about Kazakin. It's not just about reinforcements. You have good old-fashioned, normal strategic reserves. Stuff that you just put in there at the beginning of the game and it comes on and has a great time. You've got tanks with tank commanders that can now go in reserve. Oh man, I don't know if I've got enough ruins to hide all my tanks behind. I don't want to get picked off turn 1 by those Eldar fire prisms. That's alright. Put your tank commander, another Leman Russ in reserve, or 2 Leman Russes in reserve, put them in reserve. They come on, they shoot stuff, no issues. Oh, pair of Hellhounds coming on. Tank commander boosting them, nice. Yeah, it's just, you can boost your tanks coming in from reserve with this as well. You can also boost your infantry. Who here remembers the glory days of the 5th edition Guard Codex with Captain Al-Rahem outflanking his whole platoon of like 100 dudes and them coming in from reserve and them all getting orders and you just sweeping the enemy away, opening up an entirely new flank, executing a genuine pincer maneuver that actually did something. Well, you know what? Those days are back and they're better than ever. Because back in 5th edition, it used to be totally random whether you came in on the left flank or the right flank or wherever you came in. Now, you can come in on the left if you want to come on the left. Come on the right if you want to come in on the right. If it's turn 3 onwards, come in from the fucking back edge. Come in where your opponent was when their deployment zone. You're absolutely gravy, baby. I personally am looking forward to using this to relive the glory days of the 5th edition Codex, to relive the glory days of outflanking entire guard companies. And if we want to talk about playstyles that have been buffed, ho, baby, pure infantry guard, my favorite way of guarding it up on the field, just got a whole hell of a lot better. I can now deploy 120, 150 infantry on the board, hide it all behind the generous allocation of L-shaped ruins, and anything that won't fit behind, I don't have to like put out in the open and expect it to die. I can put it in reserve and it can come on safe and sound where I need it to be and it can start blasting. No problems whatsoever. I am looking at this with an evil glint in my eye. I'm thinking, look, 240 line infantry, we start on the board with a whole bunch of like Catachans that they can scout forward, maybe some infantry squads. And then I'm thinking Kriegers in reserve, I'm thinking Cadians in reserve, all sorts of special weapons, melter guns, we got plasma guns, we got sharp knives, we got sticks, we got electronic ball breakers. And it's all going to come in and hit my enemy hard. Oh, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to, in rapid fire range, all these special weapons. Pfft, we'll be able to now. If I'm coming in with the 9 inches of you, I'm coming in to get you. Oh. This just took your infantry, which its only barrier to being one of the best playstyles is just real world logistics of maneuvering that many models around. It just made maneuvering it much easier. It made deploying it much easier. It just made using it a lot more effective. And that just about covers everything from the Munitorum Field Manual and the Balance Data Slate. One tiny last little bit to cover. The rules commentary. There's one change really in there that affects the guard, and that is the clarification around reinforcements and stratagems and battle shock. Essentially, if your unit was battle shocked when it died, it counts as being battle shocked when you try and use a stratagem like reinforcements on it, and therefore you can't. So if your unit is battle shocked, you can't use reinforcements on it. I was already playing it that way. I thought most people were, but at least now it is clarified. There's no more confusion. So if you're battle shocked, no reinforcements for that particular unit. With that last bit covered off, let's summarize. In total, I think that the guard has come out of this buffed. I think Manticores being nerfed was a strange decision, but I think it was kind of, for lack of a better term, so last year, so last meta. I think that people were already pivoting. That's not a big deal. I think the bigger deal is other stuff not getting the attention that it needs. But let's see how things pan out with Voice of Command. I think that Voice of Command might move the guard win rate by sort of 2 to 3%. I think at the moment we're hovering around that sort of 43-45% win rate. And I think what this will do is essentially push us into being somewhat comfortably in the Goldilocks zone. At the moment, we're constantly hovering between being in the Goldilocks zone of having that sort of 45% win rate to being below it. And I think what this will do is basically just solidify our position as a solid mid-tier faction. We can take on a lot of armies out there. We're not the bottom of the barrel, but we are not the top meta-shaping faction either. We're in a relatively comfortable position. But at least that's what I think. Of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comments section below. How are you feeling about this balanced data slate, especially in regards to the Emperor's true finest? And are there other factions that you think have been buffed or nerfed from this whole thing? Don't forget to smash that like button if you've enjoyed today's video. It really does make a huge difference. And if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more analysis and meta content like this, then please consider subscribing to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian Glory Hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing. Truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full-time without the incredible and generous support of my members. So thank you guys so much. And last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, and they have truly gone above and beyond the call of duty. So a big shout out to Bon Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Varney. Thank you guys so much. Your incredible generosity is a massive part of how I'm able to do Mordian Glory full time, and it is a big driving force behind the channel. But I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching, and of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.